Two machines broke in Qatar in March, and the operator says fixing them could take 5 years. So here's my call. About 60% odds Baker Hughes equipment backlog clears $40 billion when it reports third quarter results in late October. In June it was $37.1 billion. That's in the earnings release, free, so you can hold me to it. 5 years to rebuild two things that had already been built once. Everything that follows is why that number is the most important one in this industry. On March 18, an attack on Qatar's Ras Laffan facility damaged 2 liquefaction trains. The Energy Information Administration puts the loss at 17% of Qatar's export capacity. The wider closure of the Strait of Hormuz that began on February 28 cut off more than 10 billion cubic feet a day of supply, about a fifth of the LNG on Earth. As of the EIA's July assessment, Qatari exports were still down because of it, though there's now a memorandum of understanding to resume shipping, and that situation is genuinely unsettled. The strait can reopen. Diplomacy moves fast when it wants to. 2 broken trains are a different kind of problem. That one's a manufacturing problem, and manufacturing doesn't negotiate. Could America cover the gap? In March, U.S. export terminals ran at 94% of the maximum the Department of Energy has approved. There's no idle capacity waiting. The only real answer is new trains, and new trains mean new equipment. Which brings me to the part almost nobody noticed. In September 2024, Air Products sold its entire LNG process technology and equipment business to Honeywell for $1.81 billion. In July 2026, Baker Hughes closed on Chart Industries at a $13.6 billion enterprise value. 22 months apart, and the second check was more than 7 times the size of the first. Neither buyer was an LNG company. One does factory automation, the other does oilfield services. The market spent 3 years watching the molecule, and while it watched, somebody quietly bought the machine. If you saw the gas turbine episode, you know half of this already, because it's partly the same hardware sold to a different customer. A liquefaction train chills natural gas to 162 degrees below 0 Celsius, until roughly 600 cubic feet of gas collapses into 1 cubic foot of liquid. That takes refrigerant compressors the size of locomotives, a gas turbine to drive them, and then the component doing the actual work. That component is a heat exchanger. In the big onshore plants it's a coil-wound exchanger, a steel cylinder up to 7.5 meters across, weighing a couple of hundred tons, packed with kilometers of tubing wound by machine. It's the most specialized object in the plant, and the one you can't improvise. So who builds them? Air Products designed and manufactured them at Port Manatee, Florida. That plant belongs to Honeywell now, along with roughly 475 people who transferred with it. Linde Engineering builds them at Schachen, in Bavaria, on a 200,000 square meter site staffed by more than 700 engineers and skilled workers, and says it has delivered over 1,000 of them. Florida and Bavaria. Those are the 2 names that keep coming up. I want to be careful, because I can't prove a global count and I won't pretend otherwise. But when a project needs one of these, that's the short list it's working from. If you follow how AI power and gas infrastructure actually get built, subscribe. Next one is backup power and large gensets, same depth. Chart, the company Baker Hughes just bought, didn't make the coil-wound type at all. It made brazed aluminum exchangers, cold boxes, and a process called IP85, different technology, same choke point logic. You can check this next one yourself, for free. Search every filing submitted to the SEC over the last 18 months for the phrase, brazed aluminum heat exchanger. It appears in exactly one. That one is Chart's, and Chart was delisted in July. Now, that measures disclosure, not capacity. Serious manufacturers in Europe and Japan don't file with the SEC, and Chart itself warned that independent market share data for this equipment doesn't exist. The honest version is still striking. Since July, no listed company anywhere describes this business to its investors. Which is exactly why I won't quote you a market share tonight. Nobody has a real one. The fight over Chart tells you what people thought it was worth. In June 2025, Flowserve and Chart agreed to merge as equals. On July 28 they called it off, which happens to be the same day Baker Hughes signed its own agreement with Chart. Flowserve walked away with $266 million in break fees and expenses, and Baker Hughes paid $258 million of that on Chart's behalf. Read that again. The winning bidder covered the loser's consolation prize. Then Flowserve signed a letter of intent to expand the supply agreement it already had with the company it had just lost. You don't behave that way over a commodity fabricator. The numbers since have been remarkable. Baker Hughes gas technology equipment orders went from $781 million in the second quarter of last year to $4.9 billion this year, and on that single product line orders ran 3.2 times revenue. Segment orders doubled to $7.1 billion. Backlog hit a record $37.1 billion, and management raised its 3-year order outlook above $45 billion while saying plainly that it's expanding capacity. What's inside that? 12 liquefaction modules for Venture Global, with cold boxes and control systems. Equipment for Schenner and Bechtel supporting about 6 million tons a year. For compressor trains for a floating plant at Golar, which is the 4th Golar vessel running their kit. The behavior that convinced me this bottleneck is real is better evidence than any lead time I could quote. Nobody publishes lead times. So watch what the buyers actually do. Venture Global's agreement with Baker Hughes doesn't buy compressors. It buys reserved manufacturing capacity, and the company tracks how much of that reservation it has left. Next decade went further. In June 2026 it signed a reservation agreement for Baker Hughes compressors for Train 6, in the same month it filed the applications for permission to build Train 6. They booked the factory slot before they had the permit. Then look at Commonwealth LNG's shopping list: 6 refrigerant compressors from Baker Hughes, 6 main cryogenic heat exchangers from Honeywell. One project, and both critical slots go to exactly the 2 names we've been discussing. Scarcity shows up in the price. Every American project that reached a final decision in the last 2 years lands somewhere between $1,000 and about $1,675 per ton of annual capacity. Commonwealth is the cleanest case. $11 billion in December. $12.5 billion by April. $13 billion when it took final investment decision in May. The plant never got bigger. It stayed at 9.5 million tons a year the whole time, so the cost rose 24% in roughly 5 months, on unchanged scope, while the equipment was being locked in. I'd be doing you a disservice if I stopped there, because the bear case is serious. 83 million tons a year sits approved and not building. The Department of Energy keeps moving deadlines rather than watching projects die. Cameron Train 4 got pushed from May 2026 all the way to March 2033, and had its approved volume cut by a third. Energy Transfer suspended Lake Charles outright, saying pipelines offered better risk and return. Then there's the lumpiness. Orders that leap from $781 million to nearly $5 billion in a year can fall just as fast, and that's how a cliff forms. The buyers aren't uniformly healthy either. Air Products sold the crown jewel, put the money into hydrogen, then wrote off billions. Honeywell's energy segment grew almost entirely by acquisition, organic sales down 1%. And Venture Global lost the liability phase of its BP arbitration, where BP is seeking between $3.70 and $6 billion, uncapped, at a hearing set for 2027. That's the whole board. I'll pull out only the 2 rows that surprised me. Matrix Service builds the cryogenic storage tanks. Its tank revenue grew 32% to $366 million, and it earned a 4% gross margin doing it. 4 cents on the dollar. Growth and profit are not the same thing, and that single row makes the argument better than I can. The other row has no ticker at all. Bechtel is the contractor actually building Rio Grande, 5 trains and roughly 30 million tons a year, and Bechtel is privately held. You can't own it. Which is precisely why the ownable exposure sits with the people who make the equipment instead. My read, plainly. The bottleneck in LNG was never the gas. It was the small number of places that can build the cold end of the plant. Both of the independent builders got bought inside 22 months, each at roughly 13 times earnings, by buyers who don't do LNG for a living. If I'm watching one name to express this, it's Baker Hughes. Not for the LNG headline, but because it's now the only company that can sell you the process license, the modular train, the compressor and the turbine driving it out of one catalog. And 92% of its entire backlog sits in that one segment. That is not a diversified industrial anymore. It's a concentrated bet wearing an oilfield services name. Honeywell is the runner-up. It owns the Florida exchanger plant and the process technology, and my hesitation is that its energy growth has been bought rather than earned. The pure-play developers are where I'd be most careful. They carry the construction risk, the arbitration risk and the commodity risk, and they're the ones paying these prices. The part that matters more than the LNG story. For 2 years running, roughly 85% of Baker Hughes equipment orders in that segment have been non-LNG, gas turbines for data centers. Power for the grid. In 1 quarter, 76 of them went to a single data center customer. So my second call, at about 65%, the cliff everyone fears when this wave peaks arrives later and shallower than the project charts imply, because the same factory slots get resold to power buyers. 3 things to track. Book-to-bill under 1.0 for 2 straight quarters means the queue is emptying without replacement. The non-LNG share slipping below 70% would say the diversification story is weaker than management claims. And if Laffan comes back in 2 years rather than 5, the scarcity premium deflates fast. That last one would change my mind. 5 years to rebuild 2 trains is my strongest evidence these machines are hard to make, and I'd rather flag that now than explain it later. I'm Big Z, follow me, see you in the next deep dive.